you guys, here I am once again. Remember I said last night on the live stream that I was going to do another live stream today, talking about this book that I finally finished after all of this time. I think I've been talking about it for months and months, and I finally got around to finishing it. Sorry it took me so long if you were waiting for me to review this, but, you know, I finally got around to it. So before we get into the book review, let's take a brief moment to mention our affiliate sponsor, which in this case is Audible. Now, like I said, you guys probably know what Audible is. It's a subscription service that lets you choose from a huge array of audiobooks and podcasts and things like that you can listen to from anywhere you want. My own books, most of them are available on Audible as well, and I read them all myself. So if you'd like to read some of my books and don't really want to like read them, but actually like listen to me read them to you, then you can go over to Audible and you can have that done for you. So here we go. If you click the link in the description box, you will get a free 30-day trial of Audible, which includes the ability to listen to all of their like entire catalog, which like I said is books, podcasts, pretty much anything, with no credits needed. You also get 1 credit to use on any selection that you want, and you can keep that forever. If you're already an Amazon Prime member, you actually get 2 credits to purchase whatever you want, and again, you can keep that stuff forever. So click the link in the description box for a free 30-day trial of Audible. Of course, I'm an Audible affiliate, so when you click that link and sign up, I do get a small commission, so just full disclosure there. All right. So now let's talk about this book. I actually have the print one for a change. Although I will note, I started reading the print version, and I think what happened is that I don't really, in the house, I don't really have, our house is real dark, you guys, okay? So it's like I don't really have a place where I can sit in the evening and like read a print book because it's always like too dark. Like even in our bedroom and stuff, we don't have an overhead light. We just have these 2 little lamps and they're not bright enough. You know, my old ass is so blind that I can't really see anymore. Hey, Tammy. Yeah, this is the other new wig that Tom got me for Christmas. It was this one and the one that I wore last night, the black and the white, because it's cool because I don't have any like this. So, but yeah, thank you. I really like it too. But yeah, so I think that was one of the reasons, because I really liked it. Like I was really into it, but it's just like I never had the logistics were never right for me sitting down reading it because it was always too dark, and it's just, you know what I mean. So then I found out that that Kindle Unlimited, which I have a subscription to, they had put up the ebook version of it for free, so I could read it for free. And I was like, woohoo, I can finally finish this book because I can just read it on my computer, you know what I mean? Which I don't usually like to do, but it's just easier, just the way everything is configured. But I did actually buy this book a long time ago, so I do have the print version, which I'm glad I do, because this is illustrated, and the ebook version, like all the paintings and stuff like that, are black and white, and they're still beautiful, but the print version, which is right here, actually has color paintings in the middle. So because, you know, look at, oh, and also check this out. This is a metal bookmark. I got it at Books A Million. I couldn't resist. I mean, you guys are like horror fans, so you know what that is, but if you don't, it's the wallpaper pattern from Room 237 in The Shining, so, you know, because I'm a dork like that. But yeah, I was like, oh my god, I have to. It was like $7, but I was like, I don't care, I have to get it. But yeah, so if you look in the middle of the print book, I'm trying not to get a glare on it, there's these really gorgeous like paintings of like all the characters, you know, and these are like pretty freaky, you know. So I'm glad that I invested in the print version. But yeah, so in case you didn't see the cover, this is called Slewfoot by Brom. So yeah, Gerald Brom is actually his name, but he's obviously more professionally known just by his last name. So he is just this insanely talented artist and writer. I was kind of peripherally aware of his stuff, just seeing other people talk about it, like when I would be browsing through the bookstore, like sometimes, because his books are always so gorgeous, like the covers and stuff, that they would always kind of put them out on display, so I always kind of saw them. He actually started out, I believe, as a commercial illustrator, like for big companies like Coca-Cola and stuff. And then later on, he went freelance and started doing art for like card games and like big card games. And I think he did Magic, maybe did some Magic the Gathering. I could be wrong about that. But he does like video games, book covers. He does stuff for movies. Like I think he did the original like poster art for Sleepy Hollow, the Tim Burton movie, like among other things. But that was the one that I was most familiar with. So obviously, Brom is also a novelist. Now, as far as I'm aware, all of the novels that he's written also feature like his really beautiful illustrations in them, like this one does. Now, I get the impression, I'm not sure about sales and everything like that, but just from the chatter about his work, I get the impression that his most popular work is Krampus the Yule Lord, which came out in 2012, and I remember seeing that in the bookstore too. But for whatever reason, I just never got around to like dipping into his written stuff until just recently when I picked that up. I actually had seen, I think it was Gwendoline Reads, which is another YouTube channel that I watch where she reviews books and stuff. And I think she was talking about this and I was like, ooh, that sounds really cool. And she really loved it. And I was like, I probably should pick that up. So just when I saw it at the bookstore, I was like, yeah, I remember Gwendoline reading it and really liking it. So I thought that I would like it too. So I'm going to say if you're into historical horror or folk horror, and especially if you liked the Robert Eggers movie, The Witch, you will probably love this. This will be right in your wheelhouse. And I would definitely recommend it if you're into any of that kind of stuff. It's very immersive. It's just like this harrowing story where things go from bad to worse to like fucking terrible, you know what I mean? And it's just the whole time you're like, oh no. It's one of those kind of stories. Has a great lead character and kind of like a really cool narrative that, you know, delves into witchcraft, you know, religious intolerance, maybe even like the nature of humans' relationships with their gods, you know what I mean? Like different types of gods, which I thought was really cool. So the story is set in a Puritan village called Sutton in 1666. I think it's either in Connecticut or West Virginia. I can't remember. And the protagonist is a young woman, I believe she's 19 or 20 or something like that, named Abatha Williams. Now, she's originally English. She's from London, but she was essentially like sold off by her dad as a wife to a Puritan in the New World. And she had never met the person before. Obviously, they just stuck her on a ship and was like, hey, you're going to go marry this guy. Bye. You know what I mean? That kind of shit. Now, luckily for her, at least at first, her husband, the guy she's married to, Edward, is a nice man. Like, he's very kind. He's very gentle. He is quite a bit older than she is. And he's really reserved and really introverted. So their relationship, like, they do have sex and stuff, but he seems kind of awkward. And, you know, and so he doesn't have, like, a lot of passion and stuff because, you know, he's a Puritan and they're a little uptight and shit like that. So it's kind of more like a friendship or a partnership. But he does, like, feel you know, sexual attraction for her and stuff like that, and she kind of feels it for him too. But it's kind of like it's kind of a cool relationship that they have, actually. So the two of them live on this farm, which is kind of out in the wilds, like outside of town, like some distance. And so they work together. Like I said, they're good partners to kind of try and like make this farm profitable, like make it work, right? Now Abatha, because she's kind of from the big city, she's very strong-willed. She's very independent. She's real mouthy. So she's having a really hard time adjusting to this Puritan bullshit. You know what I mean? She's actually been reprimanded several times and threatened to like be put in the stocks and whatnot. Which, you know, they have a lot of stocks in this town because, like, seriously, you fart wrong and they're going to put you in the stocks because they're like, heathen, you know what I mean? It's that bad. So she does, though, seem to be genuinely trying to fit in, like, for the sake of her husband, you know what I mean? But she kind of, like I said, she's kind of mouthy, so she kind of, like, can't really keep her opinions to herself, you know what I mean? Like, when something pisses her off, she's going to say something, and she's like, fuck, I shouldn't have said anything. You know what I mean? It was that kind of thing. So, obviously, this has put her at odds with most of the other townsfolk. They still see her as an outsider, a troublemaker, you know what I mean? They don't really, they aren't really that into her, you know what I mean? So, there's also this very big, sticky problem that emerges near the beginning of the story. And this problem is in the form of Edward's horrible older brother, Wallace Williams. So when Edward and Wallace's dad died, he left 2 farms in Sutton. Both of them are in Wallace's name because he's the eldest brother. So Edward, the younger brother, was given kind of the shitty, smaller one to live on, while Wallace got the big, nice one, you know what I mean? Now, Edward and Abatha have been paying essentially rent, like part of their crop or whatever, to Wallace, like once a month or once a season or however. And they actually only have one more payment to him, and then they'll own the little farm, like free and clear. However, without telling them, or anyone really, Wallace put up the farm that Edward is living on as collateral for like a tobacco growing business venture that he was starting. Well, that business venture didn't work out. He lost his shirt. And now his creditors are obviously asking for payback. So Wallace, this douchey, condescending asshole, shows up at Edward's farm and basically tells his brother, hey, you and your wife now owe half of your yield every season to Wallace's creditor, who's this guy named Lord Mansfield, for the next 20 years. So obviously they only had one more payment before they owned the farm outright, and now that has just been, pissed down Wallace's leg pretty much. Now they're stuck in indenture. It's essentially like, tenant farmers for like 20 years to come, right? Because of Wallace doing this underhanded shit. Obviously, Abatha is fucking furious about this, as, understandably, as you should be. But, this was 1666. This is a Puritan village. Women were just supposed to like sit down and shut up and not give their opinions about anything, especially business, because that was man stuff. So, frustratingly, Edward is actually kind of passive because he's sort of used to his older brother, who's kind of a bully, like kind of always kicking him around, you know what I mean? And so he never really stands up for himself. Now, later on, Abatha, who absolutely will stand up for herself and him, she convinces Edward to grow a pair and go to the town magistrate to see what can be done about this. Because it seems like, an injustice, you know what I mean? Now, this does initially work out in their favor. The magistrates do agree that it was a dick move for Wallace to put Edward's farm up against the loan instead of his own farm. You know what I mean? Because they're like, well, why didn't you? He's like, well, I own them both, so it shouldn't matter, blah, blah, blah. But they, kind of sort through it. And the magistrates are like, yeah, you guys are kind of right. Like, you need to work out some other deal, Wallace. So Wallace obviously is fucking livid about this and accuses Abatha of essentially poisoning Edward against him. And so he says, well, I'm just going to go like over you guys' heads, over the magistrates' heads rather, and he's going to go to the higher-ups in Hartford, who he's pretty tight with, unfortunately, because all the assholes hang out together, I guess. So Edward and Abatha, seemingly they can keep the farm for now, although it's still like on pretty shaky ground. But then, and this isn't really, well, all of my book reviews, I do kind of go into like the first third of the story or something, and I try not to like spoil the ending. But I know that some people like to go into books not knowing anything about them, which if you do, I don't know why you would be watching a book review about it, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just saying that this isn't really a spoiler because it happens very early in the story, and I think it's even in the description of the book. But, if you don't want to know anything about the story, then you might want to go read the book and then come back later. You know what I mean? I'm just saying. So maybe they can keep the farm, sort of, provisionally. But then a horrible, horrible tragedy takes place that ends up kind of throwing everything into chaos. So one of the couple's goats, whose name is Samson, like wanders off, and it seems that he falls into this really deep, dark, creepy hole that maybe is haunted. Like, it kind of has like some whispery voices and shit like that coming out of it. Now, Edward tries to go and retrieve the animal because it's very valuable, obviously, because you can get milk from it and, and meat and stuff. But Edward falls into the same pit and dies. And this leaves Abatha, obviously, a very vulnerable widow in a town full of people who don't particularly like her. Now, Wallace, naturally, like a vulture, swoops in immediately, like following Edward's death. Like, it was like the same day or the next day. He's just like, ooh, you know what I mean? Rubbing his hands together. So he's trying to get his grubby mitts on the farm, right? Which is what he wanted all along, so he can use it to pay off his debt. He also offers, he's like, this is like what happened to you, and it's like, I'm willing to be magnanimous. He's that kind of motherfucker. And he's like, I will even marry Abatha off to his son, Wallace's son, Isaac. And it's like, and you can come live in our household as a servant until you've paid all the debt off. You know what I mean? Obviously, she's not a big fan of this plan, because fuck that. So she's very resourceful, though, and like I said, she's not afraid of like standing up for herself. So she goes to the magistrates and says, hey, you know, Edward was my husband, I'm his widow. Legally, I should be able to be allowed to like run the farm on my own, because I'm technically his representative, right? And if he was alive, he would be running it. He's not alive, so I should be able to run it. Now, the magistrates, provisionally, they're like, yeah, I guess you have a good point there. So they provisionally give her permission to do this, but absolutely nobody thinks that she's going to be able to bring in the entire harvest by herself. Because, one, nobody in the town likes her, and two, she doesn't have the money to hire anybody. So she's kind of on her own, you know what I mean? And so Wallace figures, he's kind of pissed off about this, but he's like, it's only a matter of time before the farm is mine anyway, because there's absolutely no way that she's going to be able to bring in that entire harvest like on her own, you know what I mean? Now, for a while, it would seem that his prediction is correct. Abatha is having a hell of a fucking time working the farm alone, as it's, it's a big job, you know what I mean? And she's just this little 19-year-old girl or whatever. And to make matters worse, the weather is not cooperating either. Like, there's a significant lack of rain. I don't even know if it's like drought, but it's kind of like a drought, like over the summer. So her corn won't grow. Now, she's very, very stubborn, and she just absolutely does not want to give in to Wallace at all, because she can't stand his smug motherfucking face. So she just works herself to the point of exhaustion and starvation. But she gets to a point where there's just like all this shit happens and it's just getting worse and worse. And she's like, you know what? I might as well just give up and hand the farm over to Wallace. And she even kind of considers just doing away with herself. Like, I could just jump down in this well and all my problems would be over. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of shit. When she's at her lowest point, though, she seemingly gets something of a lifeline. Now, up until this stage in the story, there have been like short sections of the book written from the point of view of some kind of creature called Father, who doesn't seem to remember like who or what he is. Father is accompanied by 3 littler creatures who call themselves the Wild Folk, and they're trying to get him to revert to his true nature, which is kind of bloodthirsty, and feed this sapling in the forest that they call Pawpaw with human blood, so it will regrow. Because apparently it used to be there, and it was this big, like, magical tree or whatever, but now it's gone, and they're trying to regrow it. But that's the only way you can feed it, with human blood. Now, these 3 creatures, I showed kind of the paintings of them, are named Forest, Creek, and Sky. And they are an opossum, a fish that swims through the air, as though it was water, and a raven. And all of them have the faces of kind of evil looking human children, like with little sharp teeth and stuff. And some of them also have like other human limbs, like human hands and stuff, because I think the raven actually has human hands, like instead of claws, and also a human face. So kind of freaky, you know what I mean? Now, it turns out that these wild folk actually fed the missing goat, Samson, and Edward, Abatha's husband, to Father, like in the process of trying to wake him up and get him to remember who he is. Now, Abatha, it should be noted, is the daughter of a cunning woman, like a witch, kind of. So when she was growing up, before when she still lived in England, her mom had taught her, like, various charms and spells when she was a kid. Like, her mom died when she was young. So Abatha sometimes, like, makes little love potions and remedies and stuff like that for the women in Sutton, in town. This is all kept on the down low, though, because, I mean, the charms are like grudgingly tolerated, but they're not really approved of. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a gray area. So just when Abatha is at the point of just giving up everything, she happens to meet Father, this creature, who is actually fascinated with her because he seems to like sense her magic, and he believes that she can help him discover his identity and like what his purpose is. Now, Forest, Creek, and Sky are pretty adamant that Father should kill her because humans are never to be trusted, and they'll destroy the forest and they'll destroy the rest of the wild folk if they're allowed to. But Father is kind of really tormented by his lack of memory and his lack of knowing who he is to really listen to them. And so he actually ends up establishing sort of an uneasy partnership, I guess, with Abatha, kind of helping her channel her unused magic in ways that will help her farm in return for her help in like sorting out his nature, because he's not entirely sure if his nature is as a creator or a destroyer. You know what I mean? So as you can imagine, Abatha befriending a horned, goat-legged forest spirit that absolutely kills people and feeds on their blood is not going to sit too well with the little Puritans there in Sutton. You know what I mean? And a lot of very, very, very bad shit happens before, you know, the whole thing is over. And that's about all I want to spoil about it, because it goes balls to the wall, like toward the end. So yeah, this was a great book. I really liked this a lot. Just the way it's written, it really kind of like immerses you in this world, which is just kind of like simultaneously like really, really brutal and also like really kind of magical. So I was really into the mythology surrounding Father and his ambiguous stance as to whether he was like a noble protector god or a merciless slayer god. I mean, that was like really well done. And it kind of introduced the idea of kind of more pagan gods, which were more nuanced, in the sense that they better reflect the uncertainties and of nature, you know what I mean? So he was that kind of a god. I also really, really liked the development of Abatha's friendship with him and her constant like push and pull, because she was just, you know, forever in turmoil about whether she really was consorting with the devil, because she didn't know. She just met him and he has very devilish aspects, but on the other hand, he kind of seems like an okay dude too. So she's not really like sure what to think. And the more they do stuff and magic and stuff together, and the more she develops like her magical, like her witch powers, she's just sitting there, am I like, because she still believes in God and she's still a Christian and stuff like that. So she's sitting there going like, am I damning my immortal soul by like hanging out this dude, even though he seems like he's okay? You know what I mean? He's not a dude, he's a creature, you know what I mean? Like a god. Also gonna say, the largely horrid people of Sutton, there were a couple of them that were okay, but most of them were just terrible assholes. But they were like really good antagonists. And they kind of demonstrated, you know, what religion can do to people's common sense, you know, if taken to extremes. Because like I said, there's kind of like a witch trial aspect to this as well. And you can see how the kind of shit happened in Salem, similar kind of thing. And Wallace in particular was intensely hateable. So part of the fun of the book was kind of waiting for him to get his richly deserved comeuppance, because you knew it was going to happen. Like, you knew it was building up to it. And you were just like, oh my God, I can't wait till this guy gets his fucking shit pushed in. You know what I mean? Because he was such a dick. Now I'm going to say, like, I felt like maybe I saw other people complain about this. I didn't really think this, but some people said, oh, the buildup of the story was really slow. But like I said, I don't really mind that at all, because you just kind of got into the rhythm of it. You know what I mean? And I was really invested in Abatha's character. So it's like I kept getting outraged on her behalf, like every time some new indignity like befell her, you know what I mean? Because every time it just gets worse and worse, and it's just like the universe is just like shitting on this poor girl, you know what I mean? And you're just like, oh my God, something good has to happen, because it just gets worse and worse. I mean, the thing about like living in this time period as a woman, you know, in this time period, in this environment, would have been an absolute fucking nightmare. And I think this book does a really good job of conveying just how hopeless somebody in Abatha's position would have, how hopeless that would have been, you know what I mean? And it really makes you understand how maybe somebody that was in that position would want to, or get to a point where they needed to join forces with a, could be a demon, not really sure, if it meant that she could just get like the tiniest sliver of an advantage like over all of these people that were like fucking with her, you know what I mean? So you could totally see how that would happen. Hey Marcus, I've always wanted to read this one. Yeah, it's great. I really, really like it. Now keep in mind that, I mean, the first 2/3 of it, like I said, is this kind of build up and just the life shitting on her. And then, you know, when she meets Father, and then that all that magical stuff starts to happen. But the final third of the book is pretty violent and bleak. You know, there's women being tortured, people having their guts ripped out. one scene of cat death, which was fucking horrible. And it's just like, because the whole time, like, when because I knew she had a cat, and of course she's gonna get like accused of that being her familiar and stuff like that, and I was like, oh man, the whole time I was like, this is not gonna end well for this cat, and whoa, it really didn't. And I was just kind of like, oh man, that like almost made me cry, like reading that stuff about the cat. I'm like, that is so fucked up. It was like so fucked up. So just know that going in. It's not the most graphic thing ever, don't get me wrong. It's not like extreme horror or anything, but it does get a little bit gnarly toward the end. So just kind of a heads up. Like I said, there is like torture and stuff like that. So I'm going to say, like, anybody that has any interest at all in, you know, the history of witch trials, or, you know, ancient folklore, ancient American folklore, Native American folklore, or something like this, I feel like you should probably love this. And like I said, if you really liked Robert Eggers' The Witch, you'll probably be really into this too. So I would absolutely recommend it to anybody that likes that kind of stuff, like, without hesitation. And I'm going to say, like, I showed you some of the paintings that were in there. They're also just, there's more of them than that, but they're, like, really, really stunning. That's why it's kind of cool to get the print book, because they have the color ones in there. The ebook is just, they're just black and white, but they still look great, you know what I mean? And I like that he had each character, like, a painting of them, you know what I mean? Because it made me, like, help me picture the story a lot more vividly, like, seeing what the characters looked like. So this is my first work of his that I've read, of Brom's. And I'm definitely going to be reading more of it, because I'm just vibing. I'm vibing with it, and I'm just surprised that it took me this long to get to it. But, you know, better late than never, I guess. But yeah, I really, really like this a lot, and I would definitely recommend it if you're into that kind of stuff. So I guess I'm going to wrap it up for the day. Remember to come back tomorrow night for our Sidetracks show at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So me and Tom will be just being here drinking and shooting the shit. And I might do another live stream, probably a movie, but I'm not sure what movie it's going to be yet. It might be Sunday or Tuesday. I'm not really entirely sure. But yeah, so thanks for dropping by and listening to my book review today, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow night. Good night.